If your sales and marketing teams are still playing tug of war, this is the episode for you. We're diving in how to fix misalignment in this episode of Closing Time. Welcome to Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of marketing for Unbounce, Insightly, and LeadsRx. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Davis. He is the author of a book called Create Togetherness. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Val, thank you for having me.
So you have quite an impressive career, Jeff, ranging from sales as an individual contributor, business development, marketing leadership at both early stage startups and some Fortune 100 companies. How has this experience led you to have passion for marketing and sales alignment?
Yeah, Val, well, simply I have lived it. And so, this has happened and become more of a thing. But back in my day, you really either stayed in sales or you stayed in marketing. And so I made the transition, the early part of my career in field sales, carrying the bag, so to say, and then was really inspired to transition to marketing, a lot of which because I felt like marketing didn't understand what we salespeople needed in the field. And I felt like I had a unique perspective to bring to the marketing team. And I always joke and say I wanted to advocate for salespeople within the ivory tower, so to say. And so I went back to get my MBA and transformed myself into a marketer. And what I found is in every organization I worked in, whether it be Fortune 500 or early stage startups, I saw the same thing repeatedly over and over again. And what that was is that sales and marketing did not fully appreciate the value that they brought each other. They did not understand the power of the relationship of when they are unified, how much more they could achieve. And so that's really what inspired me to say, like, there's got to be a different way to do this. And I've just always been passionate about it. And I think because I made that transition from sales to marketing, I just had this aha moment of like, there is so much to unlock here if you do it right. And so that is why I have focused majority of my career and my time in speaking and working with companies, focusing on how they can transform the revenue engine to align sales and marketing and really fully unlock the revenue potential.
I love that perspective. I mean, clearly just with the range of types of companies you've worked for and types of roles you've had, you've definitely seen it all. So what are some telltale signs that, hey, there's an alignment issue between sales and marketing going on in this company?
Yeah, this reminds me of a time. So I was doing a keynote for TMSA, which is the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. And I was talking about and kind of was centering around partnerships and how these unlikely partnerships like Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs come together and create something really special. And so I talked about this theme around sales and marketing, especially their leadership having a dysfunctional relationship. And one of the leaders came up to me afterwards. He was a sales leader, sales executive, had been in sales all his life. And he's like, you really made me think differently about the relationship I had with marketing because me and the marketing director have a good personal relationship. They got along, they were cordial with each other, but he had never thought about the fact that they did not have an effective professional relationship. In meaning, he was like, I never knew what to ask them to do. I never knew what to expect. I never knew how to sit down and have a conversation to say, like, this is what I need from your team. And so, in fact, what happened was he just focused on coaching his team to not rely on marketing and not out of malice, but more so, he did not want them to rely on something that he didn't know was going to provide value to his team. And so I think it's important to identify that, like, sometimes you just don't know what you know, but when you have that dysfunctional relationship, it is part and parcel for a misalignment between sales and marketing. Some of the other things we see play out is you have a disconnected customer experience, and we know that is detrimental to buyers buying. One great example of that is, buyers repeat what they have shared with you from that handoff between like the BDR and AE, which is very frustrating. And you have a lot of people follow the funnel because they're like, I'm repeating the same thing at every handoff. Do you even know, who I am and what I'm trying to achieve? You're not really providing value. And then you also see this, and I've run into this myself, where marketing and sales don't agree on the ICP. And so you have, the sales force going rogue. It feels like they're going rogue because what salespeople will do what salespeople need to do in order to close the sale. And if they find that an ICP is not providing them value or doesn't match their reality, they will go find the business. And so that is not, and we know this, right? That's not the optimal way to operate. But that's another sign that, like, if we are talking a very different language and we're going after very different people, that we need to step back, recalibrate, because there's definitely misalignment between the two teams.
I think all those signs are super valid, but I do like the way you started with leadership, because it really does start at the top. And if the marketing leader and sales leader lack alignment, I don't care if everything else is falling in line. It's just not going to be successful. So really good point there.
Yeah, 100%.
So you've identified in your work 5 big ideas based on your experience that can help bridge the gap between marketing and sales. I'd like to go through them one by one. Let's see how many we can get through, because there's a lot of good meat here. All right. So we'll start with the top. Misalignment as a business design flaw. You say that most companies are structured to discourage collaboration. Let's unpack that.
Yeah. So early in my work in thinking about this problem, and so for me, this is many, many years ago, I literally started blogging. I was frustrated. I was working at an organization where I was brought in to really kind of reimagine marketing, and the CEO didn't really believe in marketing. So there was a lot of convincing going to that. And it was the whole thing. That'd be a whole nother podcast on the show. But but neither here nor there. I really thought it was a people problem. And I think historically, a lot of us say, well, if just sales and marketing got along, that they were forced to collaborate and put it in a room, it'll all, like, magically work out. And I would say early in this work, I believe that. I believe that, like, once you showed them the value that their counterpart would bring, I thought that leadership would get it, and then they would kind of like magically come together. There was some early research, I believe, from Forrester, that showed kind of like this list of all the things that marketing provided sales, and sales provided marketing, and then kind of closing that gap would alleviate that. But what I found over the years is that is not the case. And so I really did some digging and some thinking about, like, why does this seem to be a systematic issue that's never fully resolved in most organizations. You have organizations that have made great strides in the previous years. You have some that have had initiatives that have not really sustained, and you've had some organizations that continue to struggle with it. And so what I identified as I really started to kind of unpack this work and think about my past experiences talking to executives and really deep diving into research is that it is a design issue. It is a org design issue. And that we historically, sales and marketing have grown up in a way in the organization. And I won't go into, like, kind of the history of how, and no one wants to admit this, marketing was born out of sales, which always makes ruffles people's feathers, but that's the reality of things. And then over time, as marketing started to get closer and closer to the C-suite, involved in pricing, involved in more mass marketing campaigns post-industrial revolution, they started to kind of drift away. Marketing became more strategic and closer to the C-suite, and then sales was still kind of field-based. And so the way they looked at the business was different. And what most organizations have done is they've optimized vertically for the function, but they have not optimized horizontally. And so what you're doing is you're creating incentives for people to optimize for their function and really focus on meeting the goals of their scorecards, but not thinking holistically about the business. So this is where you see you can have a sales and marketing team hitting their goals, but we still miss our revenue targets because of a multitude of things, right? But the main being folks are focused on their function because that's where the paycheck comes from. And we many times don't have interdependent targets. And so they're not directly connected to revenue. And so all of that creates this kind of soup where people are just focused on their own thing. And we are wondering why, like, it's not translating at the top. And that's why. And so that, again, goes back to, that's not a people issue. That's a way in which we are designing the system. And it has worked for decades. But as we especially move into this more digital age and the stakes are higher for the buyer, they're more digitally savvy. They have access to information, unlimited information, let alone introducing AI. That just doesn't work anymore. And so until we address the actual system design, you will never fully align sales and marketing because it's more than a people issue. And so that's why I say, as you unpack all of that, you start to look at it differently of, like, we've got to put these people in the right environment so all their hard work actually translates to the results we want to consistently.
I love that you pointed out something that individual contributors can have goals and can meet their goals. And then they can see that overall revenue isn't where we want to be, or the bookings aren't where we want them to be. And it can create dissonance within each individual contributor, each individual employee. Like, hey, I'm doing what I'm being asked to do. I'm hitting the metrics that that have been set out for me. And
Right.
yet, and my colleagues are, and yet the business isn't moving where we want to go. It can be really frustrating.
100%. 100. And then also frustrating for leadership because somebody's got to answer for the fact that we're not hitting our revenue goals. But it's like hard to who. And then when you start the finger pointing, and you know how this all goes. So it's frustrating for everybody. And that, again, goes back to why I strongly believe it's a system issue, not a people issue.
Let me ask you, we have a couple of departments or teams that I think can assist with that misalignment issue. And I'm probably not using the right words here, but here at Unbounce, we have a wonderful sales enablement function that can bridge the gap between marketing campaigns and sales, putting them into action. We have a really strong RevOps team that can ensure all of the tooling is aligned and that everything is operating at a good pace and everything is being delivered where it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Are roles like that something that maybe helps with the business design flaw, or are you saying it's something bigger than that?
I think it absolutely helps, but I would say it's something that's larger than that. I think those are roles that create um, a better intersection between teams. But when I look at it at the macro level, we really have to go, and then we'll probably get this a little bit later in our conversation. It really all starts with culture. And so I think sometimes what we try to do is that we over-index on the structure of the organization, aka like adding new roles, which I think again have value, and trying to align us around the strategy too soon. And those things to me are what is supported by the upfront work, which is around culture, making sure that we have a communication rhythm that allows us to stay connected, which I believe some of those sales enablement functions help with that, really developing an end-to-end process so that we clearly understand we have a co-created buyer's journey, which I can't tell you how many organizations I've talked to where sales has no idea what the buyer's journey is, which makes me literally want to jump out of my skin, partly because I'm a marketer. And then like I came from sales. So I'm just like, there's total disconnect there. And then making sure that we have a tech stack that is optimized, a core revenue tech stack that supports and actually operationalizes that. And so I think, again, those roles add value, but if we haven't laid a strong foundation in order to be able to allow people to be in the right environment, then they don't fully get optimized.
That's great, Jeff. I do think those roles are important, but I do see it's a bigger picture. Let's move on to the next big idea you've identified as being a root of a problem and you've coined it the misalignment tax. What is the cost of staying misaligned and how do leaders quantify it?
Yeah, this one is a tough one. And I think it is caused a lot of angst for sales and marketing leaders that want to get the support from senior leadership on, taking on this kind of effort. It would be easy for me to come in and be like, oh, it's $23 million. That's how much sales and marketing costs if they're misaligned. And the reality of that is it is going to be different, throughout every organization, whether you're an early stage startup, mid-market, or enterprise. Now, Marketo and Resource did some research several years ago where they estimated about 10% of revenue loss can be attributed to misalignment between sales and marketing. I think that's a great starting point. There's a little bit more realistic. There was in past days, a number around like 1 billion or something, which, never really sat well with me. And I'm not saying it was incredible. It was hard for people to really wrap their heads around. So I think the 10% of revenue is a little bit of an easier metric to start with. But I think beyond that, it really comes down to you having to figure out what that is for your organization, both the quantitative costs as well as the qualitative costs. And so that's kind of how I think about it. And so on the quantitative side of things, I look at things like low quality pipeline. So when we are misaligned, going back to ICP, what does marketing do? They're incentivized to bump or push a bunch of leads into the pipeline, which may or may not be the right targets. Sales either looks at them and says, like, these are garbage, this is not a fit, or there's a delay in us actually working those leads because there's not trust between the MQLs and SQLs, right? So that is a cost. stalled deals. Again, we don't have definitions that are clear when handoffs are happening. All of these things contribute to that cost. And then also to the broken customer experience, which you talked about earlier, is that has become more important than price and product, and developing a cohesive, seamless experiences. People will opt out. Most organizations have direct competitors. And even if you don't, I think, in this day and age, people
You
just
will.
don't want, yeah, you will. And people don't want the terrible experiences. And it always, I talk to B2B, revenue leaders, and I said, it's funny to me how we have all these great, amazing experiences outside of work in B2C land, right? Netflix, Amazon, Zappos, like these easy to navigate experiences where, and I'll call myself out on this one. We had to stop hitting, buy on Amazon because I just, it's so easy. You just start buying stuff and you're like, I don't remember buying this. And so one of the things we've done is to stop and say, we're going to recalibrate, wait till Sunday. And if we still need it, then we purchase it to kind of alleviate that. But my point is, it's easy. And so we come to these B2B experiences and we make it complicated and cumbersome and hard, and not thinking that like our expectations outside of work don't bleed inside of work. And so that's absolutely a cost that we should think about. Also, too, the misalignment, especially, and we may get into this too, when you're looking at like dashboards and arguing over the number, marketing says one thing, sales says something else, who knows the truth? That delays us being able to act quickly and take advantage of strategic opportunities. And then, look at the qualitative side, morale, trust between departments. And then sometimes if it's really, really dire, you'll have top talent that will just leave because they're frustrated with not having a clear way to be set up for success and execute. And so I think it comes down to looking at both the quantitative and qualitative cost of alignment, that tax, so to say, and then working with your cross-functional leadership team to say, how do we estimate what this is actually looks like for us? And then that's when you start to build the business case for leadership to say, like, no, there's some hard metrics behind this that we can give you some ranges and really start to get to a number that makes sense for your business.
I love that you have quantitative and qualitative measurements there, because yes, everybody can relate to 10% of revenue, but we're in the midst of a performance review cycle here at Unbounce. And, it's super important that we get that qualitative feedback from, if they're feeling misalignment. It's not just about the numbers. It's exactly what you said. It's about, we want to keep our good people here. We want to make them happy and to keep them engaged. And so the alignment has to be there, or else they're going to find someplace else to go.
Yep. 100%.
All right. Let's jump into another big idea, alignment as an operating system, so that it shouldn't be treated as just an initiative. It's the foundation of the business. So how do you know if that foundation is cracked, and what do leaders need to do?
Yeah. So most cracks are going to be the symptoms of not having that alignment operating system that we talk about again, right? It's not about having an initiative. We know that initiatives in this instance, this is such a massive business transformation that touches all parts of the business that it just can't be a campaign. It cannot be an initiative. It has to have full support all the way up to leadership. And why I say that, and I've seen this play out multiple times, you'll have sales and marketing leaders on board. They want to work together differently. They have some quick wins. Things are going well. And then all of a sudden the pressure mounts and they need to hit quota. They need to make the number. Senior leadership is not bought in about this whole sales and marketing thing because they see it as like a qualitative collaboration, work together better sort of thing, because it hasn't been framed up properly and you haven't earned the right to really embark on this transformation because you don't have a strong business case. And then they will tell them like, stop it, halt, I'm not supporting that anymore. I need you to focus on core business, because they don't look at it as the core business. And so that's why I say that you really have to, again, level this up to be like, this is the way we operate, because it enables you to do everything else. This is not just about collaboration. It's not about just getting in a room together and saying like, let's put some slogans on the board and say like, we're one team. It really is about redefining the way that you do business.
I love that, Jeff. It can really be a side of desk initiative when, the quarter's ending or the month's ending, but it really can't be a side of desk initiative. It has to be the initiative. So I love that. Jeff, I want to dive into the rest, but we are running short on time. We like to keep closing time episodes pretty short so folks can grab them in bite-sized chunks. Can I invite you back to go over the last two and really dive into the last one? Because I know there's some meat there.
I would absolutely love the opportunity to come back and talk about the last two big ideas.
Okay, great. In the meantime, if folks want to learn more about you or your work, where should we send them?
Yeah, best places to find me on LinkedIn. Meet Jeff Davis is my handle. And then you can also check out my book, Create Togetherness, on all platforms, and or go to createtogetherness.com and it will lead you to the Amazon link.
Awesome. Okay. Jeff's coming back and you should too. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Closing Time. Remember, you can get this episode and all the rest delivered right to your inbox. Just click the link in the show notes and we will see you next time with Jeff.